Master Chen wiped the sweat from his forehead as he finished his morning training routine. The wooden boards lay scattered around him, broken cleanly in half by his powerful strikes. At 42 years old, he had spent nearly 3 decades perfecting his martial arts skills. His dojo in the small mountain town had produced many champions, but none matched his own abilities. The morning sun streamed through the windows of his training hall, casting long shadows across the polished floor. Chen had built this place with his own hands 20 years ago. After returning from his travels across Asia, he had studied under masters in Japan, China, and Thailand, absorbing their techniques like a sponge. Now his reputation extended far beyond the mountains. Students would travel from distant cities just to train under him for a few weeks. They came seeking the secrets of his incredible power and lightning-fast reflexes. Chen never disappointed them. His teaching methods were intense but effective. He believed that martial arts were not just about fighting, but about discipline, respect, and understanding oneself. Today felt different, though. Chen had received an unusual letter the previous evening. It was written on expensive paper with an official seal he didn't recognize. The message was brief but intriguing. Someone wanted to meet him at the old temple ruins outside town. They claimed to have a proposition that would change his life forever. Chen was naturally suspicious. In his years of training and teaching, he had encountered many people with hidden motives. Some wanted to challenge him to prove their own skills. Others hoped to steal his techniques. A few had even tried to recruit him for illegal activities. He had turned them all away with firm but polite refusal. But something about this letter was different. The handwriting was elegant and precise. The paper felt genuine and expensive. Most importantly, the writer seemed to know details about Chen's background that few people possessed. They mentioned his time training in the Shaolin Temple, a fact he rarely shared with anyone. As Chen prepared for his afternoon classes, he couldn't shake the feeling that this meeting would be significant. His students arrived one by one, bowing respectfully as they entered the dojo. Among them was young Liu, a talented teenager who reminded Chen of himself at that age. Liu had the same hunger for knowledge and the same fierce determination to improve. The afternoon training session went smoothly. Chen put his students through their paces, correcting their stances and helping them perfect their techniques. But his mind kept wandering to the mysterious letter. Who could want to meet him so urgently? What kind of proposition could possibly change his life? After dismissing his students, Chen walked home to his simple house behind the dojo. He lived alone, having never married. His dedication to martial arts had left little time for relationships. He prepared a light dinner and sat on his porch, watching the sun set behind the mountains. The temple ruins where he was supposed to meet the mysterious person lay about an hour's walk from town. Chen had visited them many times over the years. The ancient structure had been abandoned for centuries, but it remained a place of peace and contemplation. Local legends claimed that great warriors had once trained there, perfecting secret techniques that were lost to time. As darkness fell, Chen made his decision. His curiosity had gotten the better of him. He would go to the meeting, but he would be careful. He changed into dark clothing and tucked a small flashlight into his belt. Though he was confident in his abilities, he wasn't foolish enough to walk into a potentially dangerous situation unprepared. The walk to the temple took him along a winding mountain path. Chen knew every stone and root along the way. He had often come here to think and meditate when facing difficult decisions. The night air was cool and crisp, carrying the scent of pine trees and wildflowers. As he approached the temple ruins, Chen slowed his pace. He could see a faint light flickering among the broken walls. Someone was already there, waiting for him. Chen's senses sharpened automatically. Every sound, every shadow, every movement registered in his awareness. He moved closer, staying in the shadows cast by the ancient stones. Through a gap in the wall, he could see a figure sitting calmly beside a small lantern. The person appeared to be alone, but Chen remained cautious. He had learned long ago that appearances could be deceiving. The figure seemed to sense his presence and spoke without turning around. The voice was calm and cultured, with an accent Chen couldn't immediately place. The person invited him to come closer, assuring him that there was nothing to fear. Chen stepped into the circle of light cast by the lantern. Now he could see his mysterious contact clearly. It was a middle-aged man dressed in expensive but simple clothes. His posture suggested confidence and authority, but his eyes held a warmth that seemed genuine. The man introduced himself simply as Mr. Wang. He thanked Chen for coming and apologized for the unusual circumstances of their meeting. He explained that what he had to discuss required absolute privacy and discretion. Chen remained standing, his body relaxed but ready for action. He had learned to trust his instincts, and something about this situation felt both intriguing and potentially dangerous. Mr. Wang seemed to understand his caution and smiled approvingly. The conversation that followed would indeed change Chen's life, though not in any way he could have imagined. Mr. Wang spoke of hidden worlds and secret responsibilities. He talked about ancient duties that were passed down through generations. Most surprisingly, he revealed that Chen's own family history was far more complex than he had ever known. As the night deepened and their conversation continued, Chen found himself drawn into a story that seemed too incredible to be true. Yet something in Mr. Wang's manner convinced him that every word was genuine. By the time the moon reached its peak, Chen's understanding of his own identity and purpose had been completely transformed. 3 days after his meeting with Mr. Wang, Chen found himself standing at the gates of the most magnificent palace he had ever seen. The journey had taken him far from his mountain home, through bustling cities and across vast plains. Everything felt like a dream, yet the ornate invitation in his pocket proved it was all very real. Mr. Wang had revealed an astonishing truth during their conversation at the temple ruins. Chen's grandfather, whom he had never met, had once served as a bodyguard to royalty in a distant kingdom. This service had created a bond between their families that spanned generations. Now, decades later, that connection was being honored. The palace walls rose like golden cliffs before him, decorated with intricate carvings and precious stones that caught the morning sunlight. Guards in elaborate uniforms stood at attention, their weapons gleaming. Chen had traveled the world and seen many impressive sights, but nothing had prepared him for this display of wealth and power. A court official approached him with a deep bow. The man's robes were made of silk so fine it seemed to shimmer with its own light. He welcomed Chen in perfect formal language and explained that he would be escorted to his quarters. From there, he would be prepared for his audience with the royal family. As they walked through the palace corridors, Chen marveled at the artwork covering every surface. Paintings depicted great battles and peaceful landscapes. Tapestries told stories of ancient heroes and wise rulers. The floors were covered with carpets so beautiful that Chen almost felt guilty walking on them. His quarters were larger than his entire house back home. The bed was draped with curtains of gold thread. Fresh flowers filled crystal vases throughout the room. A balcony offered a view of gardens that stretched to the horizon, where fountains danced and peacocks wandered freely among flowering trees. A team of servants arrived to help Chen prepare for his meeting with the royal family. They brought clothes fit for a nobleman, made from the finest materials and tailored perfectly to his measurements. Chen felt uncomfortable with such luxury, but he understood the importance of showing proper respect. The clothes transformed his appearance completely. Instead of his simple training outfit, he now wore robes of deep blue silk with silver embroidery. A jade pendant hung around his neck and soft leather boots replaced his worn sandals. When he looked in the mirror, he barely recognized himself. The court official returned to escort him to the throne room. The walk through the palace corridors seemed endless. They passed dozens of rooms, each more elaborate than the last. Courtiers in colorful clothing bowed as they passed, their curious eyes following Chen's every move. Finally, they arrived at massive doors carved from dark wood and decorated with gold inlays. Guards announced their arrival, and the doors swung open to reveal the most spectacular room Chen had ever entered. The ceiling soared high above, painted with scenes of clouds and flying dragons. Columns of polished marble supported the structure, and the floor was a masterpiece of colored stones arranged in complex patterns. At the far end of the room sat the royal family on thrones that seemed to be made of solid gold. The king was a man in his 60s with kind but intelligent eyes. His queen sat beside him, elegant and graceful in her flowing robes. Their son, the prince, appeared to be in his 30s, with the bearing of someone trained for leadership from birth. Chen approached the throne and bowed deeply, as Mr. Wang had instructed him. The king welcomed him warmly, speaking of the debt his family owed to Chen's grandfather. He explained that Chen's grandfather had once saved the life of the current king's father, and that such loyalty should never be forgotten. The conversation that followed was both formal and surprisingly personal. The royal family asked about Chen's life, his training, and his philosophy of martial arts. They seemed genuinely interested in his experiences and impressed by his achievements. Chen began to relax, finding them more approachable than he had expected. The prince was particularly fascinated by Chen's abilities. He had studied some martial arts himself but admitted that his royal duties left little time for serious training. He asked Chen to demonstrate some techniques, and soon they were discussing the finer points of combat strategy and physical conditioning. As the afternoon progressed, Chen learned more about the royal family's current situation. The kingdom faced threats from neighboring nations and internal political challenges. The king was aging, and the responsibility of leadership would soon fall to the prince. They needed advisors they could trust completely, people whose loyalty was beyond question. This was where Chen's family connection became crucial. Mr. Wang had explained that certain positions in the royal court were hereditary, passed down through bloodlines that had proven their worth over generations. Chen's grandfather's heroic service had earned his family the right to serve as personal protectors to the royal family. The king formally offered Chen the position of royal guard captain, a role that would make him responsible for the personal safety of the entire royal family. The honor was incredible, but so was the responsibility. Chen would need to leave his peaceful life in the mountains and adapt to the complex world of palace politics and international intrigue. Chen asked for time to consider the offer, and the king granted it graciously. He was invited to stay in the palace for a week, observing the daily routines and understanding what his new life would entail. The royal family wanted him to make an informed decision, not one based on shock or flattery. That evening, Chen stood on his balcony looking out over the palace gardens. The life being offered to him was beyond anything he had ever imagined. Wealth, prestige, and the chance to serve at the highest levels of power were all within his grasp. Yet he couldn't shake the feeling that accepting would mean giving up the simple, honest life he had built for himself. His thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock at his door. A young servant girl entered with his evening meal, but something about her manner seemed nervous and uncertain. As she set down the tray, she whispered quickly that she needed to speak with him privately about something very important. Chen's instincts immediately sharpened. The girl's fear was genuine, and her message suggested that palace life might be more complicated and dangerous than the royal family had indicated. He agreed to listen, and what she told him would force him to see his new situation in an entirely different light. The servant girl's name was May, and her hands trembled as she spoke in whispers barely louder than breath. She had worked in the palace for 3 years, she explained, and had witnessed things that troubled her deeply. Chen listened carefully, his martial arts training having taught him to read people's emotions and detect truth from deception. May told him about the current captain of the Royal Guard, a man named Commander Zhang. On the surface, Zhang appeared to be the perfect loyal soldier. He was strong, experienced, and commanded respect from his men. But May had overheard conversations that suggested his true loyalties lay elsewhere. According to what she had witnessed, Zhang had been meeting secretly with representatives from a neighboring kingdom that had territorial ambitions. These meetings always happened late at night in unused sections of the palace. Money changed hands, and Zhang provided information about the palace's defenses and the royal family's daily routines. Chen's expression remained calm, but internally, his mind was racing. If May's accusations were true, then the royal family was in immediate danger. The very person responsible for protecting them was actually working to betray them. Chen asked why she hadn't reported this to the king directly. May's fear became more apparent as she explained the palace's complex political structure. Zhang had many allies among the court officials, people who owed their positions to his influence. Anyone who accused him without absolute proof would find themselves dismissed or worse. Several servants who had asked too many questions had mysteriously disappeared over the past year. The young woman had decided to trust Chen because she hoped his outsider status and family connections might protect him from Zhang's reach. She also believed that Chen's reputation as a martial arts master meant he might actually be capable of doing something about the situation. Chen thanked May for her courage in speaking to him and assured her that he would investigate her claims carefully. He also warned her to be extremely cautious and to avoid doing anything that might alert Zhang to their conversation. If her suspicions were correct, then everyone in the palace could be in danger. After Mei left, Chen spent the night considering his options. He could simply leave the palace and return to his peaceful mountain home, avoiding the entire complicated situation. Alternatively, he could accept the royal position and try to work from within to uncover the truth. Both choices carried significant risks. By morning, Chen had made his decision. He sought an audience with the king and formally accepted the position of Royal Guard captain. However, he requested that his appointment be kept secret for a few days while he observed the current security arrangements. He claimed this would help him develop better protection strategies. The king agreed to this unusual request, impressed by Chen's thorough approach to his new responsibilities. Official announcements would be delayed, and Chen would spend time learning from Commander Zhang before assuming his new role. This arrangement gave Chen the perfect opportunity to investigate Mei's accusations. Over the next 2 days, Chen studied the palace routines carefully. He memorized guard schedules, patrol routes, and security procedures. He also began to notice subtle signs that supported Mei's concerns. Zhang's behavior patterns were inconsistent, and he seemed nervous whenever Chen asked detailed questions about certain areas of the palace. On the 3rd night, Chen decided to conduct his own surveillance. Using skills learned during his years of martial arts training, he moved through the palace shadows like a ghost. His breathing was controlled, his footsteps silent, and his awareness extended to every sound and movement around him. He positioned himself near the section of the palace where Mei claimed the secret meetings took place. The area was officially unused, with rooms that served as storage for old furniture and decorations. It would be the perfect location for clandestine activities, far from the main living areas and regular guard patrols. Shortly after midnight, Chen's patience was rewarded. He heard quiet footsteps approaching from 2 different directions. Using techniques that allowed him to remain completely hidden, he moved closer to observe what would happen next. Commander Zhang appeared first, looking nervously around before unlocking a door that was supposed to be permanently sealed. A few minutes later, 3 men in dark clothing arrived. Their faces were partially covered, but their expensive boots and confident manner suggested they were not common criminals. Chen positioned himself where he could hear their conversation without being detected. What he learned exceeded even his worst expectations. The men were not just gathering information about the palace defenses. They were planning a direct attack that would happen in just 2 days, during a public ceremony where the entire royal family would be present. The attack would be coordinated with an invasion from the neighboring kingdom. Zhang's role was to ensure that the palace guards would be positioned incorrectly, leaving key areas undefended. In exchange for his betrayal, Zhang had been promised a high position in the new government that would be established after the royal family was eliminated. Chen listened in horror as the conspirators discussed their plans in detail. They had been preparing for months, studying the palace layout and identifying the most vulnerable moments in the royal schedule. The upcoming ceremony would be the perfect opportunity because the royal family would be in a public space with limited escape routes. The meeting concluded, with Zhang receiving a bag of gold, coins, and final instructions for his role in the attack. After the conspirators left, Chen remained hidden for another hour to ensure he wouldn't be discovered. His mind was already working on how to handle this crisis. Simply reporting what he had witnessed might not be enough. Zhang had allies throughout the palace administration, and it would be his word against Chen's. More importantly, with the attack planned for just 2 days away, there might not be time for proper investigations and trials. Chen realized that he would need to take more direct action. His martial arts abilities, which had always been used for defense and training, might now be required to protect innocent lives. The peaceful master who had left his mountain dojo just days earlier was about to face the most dangerous challenge of his life. As he made his way back to his quarters in the pre-dawn darkness, Chen began formulating a plan. He would need to gather evidence that couldn't be disputed, protect the royal family from immediate danger, and find a way to expose the entire conspiracy. Most importantly, he would have to do all of this while appearing to be nothing more than a new guard captain who was still learning his duties. The morning of the planned attack dawned bright and clear, with thousands of citizens gathering in the palace courtyard for the annual Festival of Prosperity. Chen had spent the previous day carefully positioning himself and the few guards he felt he could trust. The challenge was enormous because he couldn't openly contradict Zhang's orders without revealing that he knew about the conspiracy. Chen had developed a clever strategy during his sleepless night of planning. Instead of directly opposing Zhang's guard arrangements, he volunteered to personally oversee security for what he called potential blind spots in the coverage. This allowed him to position loyal guards in the exact locations where the attack would likely occur. He had also spent time identifying which guards he could trust completely. May had helped him by quietly asking questions among the servant staff, learning which guards had families in the kingdom and which seemed genuinely devoted to protecting the royal family. Chen discovered that many of the younger guards were completely loyal, but they had been systematically excluded from important assignments by Zhang. The royal family appeared on the ceremonial balcony at precisely noon, dressed in their finest robes and wearing crowns that sparkled in the sunlight. The crowd below cheered enthusiastically, completely unaware of the danger surrounding them. Chen positioned himself where he could observe both the royal family and the areas where he expected the attack to begin. Zhang stood at his usual post near the main entrance, but Chen noticed that he kept checking the position of the sun, clearly waiting for a predetermined time. Several guards who were normally stationed in critical positions had been reassigned to less important duties, exactly as the conspirators had planned. At exactly 12:30, Chen saw the first sign that the attack was beginning. A group of men dressed as merchants began moving through the crowd, but their movements were too coordinated and purposeful to be genuine traitors. Chen had positioned one of his trusted guards nearby, and he gave a subtle signal that put the man on high alert. The attackers had planned their assault brilliantly. They would create a distraction in the crowd that would draw most of the guards' attention downward, while a separate team would scale the palace walls and attack the royal family directly from above. Zhang's role was to ensure that the guards responding to the distraction would be too far away to help when the real attack began. Chen watched as smoke bombs began exploding in different sections of the crowd. People screamed and ran in all directions, creating exactly the chaos the attackers wanted. Zhang immediately ordered most of the remaining guards to rush down into the courtyard to help control the panic, leaving the royal family almost completely unprotected on the balcony. But Chen was ready for this moment. Instead of following Zhang's orders, he stepped forward and calmly positioned himself directly between the royal family and the most likely attack routes. He had also arranged for 3 of his trusted guards to ignore Zhang's commands and remain at their critical positions. The prince noticed Chen's unusual behavior and started to question him, but Chen simply said that he had spotted potential threats and requested that the royal family move immediately to a more secure location. His calm confidence convinced the prince to trust his judgment, even though it meant disobeying the established security protocols. As the royal family began moving toward the interior of the palace, the real attack finally began. Grappling hooks appeared over the edge of the balcony, followed by armed men dressed entirely in black. They moved with the precision of professional soldiers, clearly expecting to find their targets exactly where Zhang had assured them they would be. Instead, they found Chen waiting for them with a calm expression that revealed nothing of the deadly skills he possessed. The first attacker to reach the balcony was a large man carrying a curved sword and a throwing knife. He seemed surprised to encounter any resistance at all, having been assured that the area would be undefended. Chen had not engaged in serious combat for many years, but his body remembered every technique he had ever learned. As the first attacker lunged toward him, Chen moved with a fluidity that seemed almost supernatural. He deflected the sword strike with his bare hand while simultaneously striking pressure, points that instantly paralyzed his opponent's arm. The second attacker tried to use Chen's engagement with the first man as an opportunity to rush past him toward the royal family. But Chen had anticipated this strategy. Without even looking in the second man's direction, he executed a spinning kick that caught the attacker in the solar plexus and sent him crashing into the palace wall. More attackers continued climbing over the balcony rail, but Chen's defensive position gave him a significant advantage. They could only approach him 1 or 2 at a time, while he could use the confined space to prevent them from surrounding him. Each confrontation lasted only seconds before another attacker was either unconscious or writhing in pain from precisely applied martial arts techniques. What truly shocked the attackers was Chen's restraint. Despite being outnumbered and facing men who were clearly trying to kill him, Chen was using non-lethal techniques. He was systematically disabling his opponents without causing permanent injury, demonstrating a level of skill that went far beyond simple fighting ability. Zhang appeared at the entrance to the balcony area, just as Chen was dealing with the last of the climbing attackers. The commander's face showed complete shock at seeing his carefully planned attack falling apart so completely. He had expected to find the royal family dead or captured and Chen nowhere to be seen. Instead, he found Chen standing calmly among a dozen unconscious or groaning attackers, barely breathing hard from the exertion. The royal family was safe behind him, protected by guards who had chosen to trust Chen's judgment over Zhang's orders. Zhang's hand moved to his sword, but he hesitated as he realized the full implications of what he was seeing. Chen clearly knew about the conspiracy, and the failure of the attack meant that Zhang's betrayal would soon be exposed. His only options now were to flee immediately or try to eliminate the witnesses to his treachery. Chen noticed Zhang's hesitation and spoke in a voice that carried absolute authority. He told Zhang to surrender peacefully and submit to the king's justice. He explained that he had evidence of Zhang's meetings with foreign agents and that resistance would only make his situation worse. For a moment, it seemed that Zhang might actually comply. But then his face hardened with desperate resolve and his hand gripped his sword handle with obvious intent. The commander had decided that his only remaining chance was to eliminate Chen and hoped that the chaos would allow him to escape the palace. Zhang drew his sword with the practiced speed of a veteran soldier, his blade gleaming as it caught the afternoon sunlight. His military training was evident in every movement as he advanced toward Chen with deadly intent. The commander had spent 15 years serving in the Royal Guard, and his combat skills were formidable by any standard. Chen remained perfectly still as Zhang approached, his hands empty and relaxed at his sides. To any observer, it would have appeared that he was completely unprepared for the attack that was clearly coming. The royal family watched in terror from behind their protective guards, certain that their new protector was about to be cut down. Zhang's first strike was a masterful overhead slash designed to split Chen's skull. The blade descended with tremendous force and precision, following a path that should have been impossible to avoid. But at the last possible moment, Chen moved with a speed that seemed to defy physics itself. He stepped slightly to one side while simultaneously raising his hand to catch Zhang's wrist. The sword blade passed within inches of Chen's head, but instead of completing its deadly arc, it stopped completely as Chen's grip prevented any further movement. Zhang's eyes widened in shock as he realized that his full-strength attack had been neutralized with what appeared to be minimal effort. Chen's counterattack was swift and decisive. He applied pressure to specific points on Zhang's wrist and forearm, causing the commander's fingers to go numb and forcing him to drop his sword. The weapon clattered harmlessly to the stone floor as Zhang stumbled backward, clutching his temporarily paralyzed arm. But Zhang was far from finished. His military experience had taught him to adapt quickly to changing circumstances. He reached for a hidden dagger with his other hand while simultaneously attempting to kick Chen's legs out from under him. The combination attack showed real tactical thinking and combat experience. Chen responded by catching Zhang's kicking leg and using the commander's own momentum against him. With a smooth circular motion, he sent Zhang spinning through the air before landing hard on the stone balcony. The hidden dagger flew from Zhang's hand and skittered across the floor, well out of reach. Zhang rolled to his feet with impressive agility and charged at Chen with his bare hands. His military training had included extensive hand-to-hand combat techniques, and he was strong enough to overpower most opponents through sheer force. He threw a series of powerful punches and elbow strikes, each one capable of causing serious damage. Chen deflected every attack with movements that seemed almost effortless. His martial arts training had taught him to redirect force rather than simply blocking it, so Zhang's powerful strikes were turned aside without Chen having to match the commander's physical strength. Each deflection left Zhang slightly off balance and more vulnerable to counterattacks. What truly frustrated Zhang was Chen's continued restraint. Even now, facing a man who had betrayed his king and tried to murder the royal family, Chen was using non-lethal techniques. His counterstrikes targeted pressure points and nerve centers that would disable rather than kill, showing a level of control that Zhang found both impressive and infuriating. The fight continued for several minutes, with Zhang becoming increasingly desperate as he realized how completely outmatched he was. His military training was excellent, but it was no match for Chen's decades of studying martial arts under master teachers. Every technique Zhang attempted had an effective counter that Chen executed flawlessly. Finally, Chen decided to end the confrontation. Zhang had thrown a powerful right cross that left him momentarily exposed. Chen stepped inside the punch and applied a technique he had learned in his youth, striking specific pressure points in rapid sequence. Zhang's eyes rolled back in his head and he collapsed to the ground, unconscious but alive. The silence that followed was broken only by the distant sounds of palace guards restoring order in the courtyard below. The smoke from the diversionary bombs was beginning to clear, and the crowd was gradually calming down as they realized the danger had passed. Chen turned to face the royal family, who were staring at him with expressions of amazement and gratitude. They had just witnessed combat skills that seemed almost supernatural, and they understood that without Chen's intervention, they would all be dead or captured by now. The prince was the first to speak, asking how Chen had known about the attack in advance. Chen explained about Mei's warnings and his own surveillance of Zhang's secret meetings. He also described the evidence he had gathered that proved the conspiracy extended beyond just Zhang to include several court officials and foreign agents. King's face showed a mixture of rage and sadness as he learned the full extent of the betrayal. People he had trusted for years had been working to destroy him and his family. The realization that his own security chief had been planning his murder was particularly painful, as Zhang had been personally recommended by advisors the king had considered completely loyal. Chen suggested that they needed to act quickly to round up the remaining conspirators before they could escape or destroy evidence of their crimes. He had identified several palace officials who were likely involved, and there were probably more foreign agents still in the kingdom who would need to be captured. The prince volunteered to lead the effort to apprehend the conspirators, working with the loyal guards that Chen had identified during his investigation. Chen offered to assist, but he also recommended that the royal family should relocate to a more secure part of the palace until they could be certain that all threats had been eliminated. As the immediate crisis came under control, Chen found himself reflecting on how dramatically his life had changed in just a few days. He had come to the palace expecting a comfortable position as a ceremonial guard, but instead he had been thrust into a situation that required him to use his martial arts skills to save lives and protect a kingdom. The king approached Chen personally to express his gratitude for what had happened. He explained that Chen's actions had not only saved the royal family, but had probably prevented a war that would have cost thousands of innocent lives. The neighboring kingdom's invasion plans would fail without their inside assistance, and the exposure of the conspiracy would deter future attempts. But the king also had a confession to make. The offer of the guard captain position had not been entirely straightforward. Intelligence reports had suggested that there were traitors within the palace, but they had been unable to identify who was involved. Chen's appointment had been designed as a way to investigate the security problems while bringing in someone whose loyalty was absolutely certain. Chen realized that he had been manipulated, but he found that he wasn't angry about it. The king's deception had been motivated by genuine need and had ultimately resulted in saving innocent lives. Sometimes the most important truths could only be discovered through indirect methods, and the king had been wise to use Chen's family connections as a way to solve a dangerous problem. 6 months later, Chen stood once again in the palace gardens, but everything had changed. The conspiracy had been completely unraveled, revealing a network of corruption that extended into 3 neighboring kingdoms. Zhang and his accomplices were serving long prison sentences, while the foreign agents had been expelled and their governments formally reprimanded for their aggression. Chen's role as royal guard captain had evolved far beyond anything he had originally imagined. The king had asked him to completely rebuild the palace security system, incorporating both traditional military tactics and the unconventional approaches that came from his martial arts background. The result was a protection system that was both more effective and more humane than what had existed before. The young guards whom Zhang had excluded from important duties had proven to be extremely capable when given proper training and responsibility. Chen had established a comprehensive martial arts program for all palace security personnel, teaching them not just fighting techniques but also the mental discipline and moral principles that were essential for protecting innocent people. Mei had been rewarded for her courage in reporting the conspiracy, receiving a promotion to a supervisory position among the palace staff. She had also become one of Chen's most trusted sources of information about daily life in the palace, as her position allowed her to observe things that might escape the attention of the formal security apparatus. But the most significant change was in Chen himself. The quiet mountain master who had once focused entirely on personal perfection had discovered a larger purpose. His martial arts skills, which he had always considered primarily tools for self-improvement, had proven capable of protecting entire kingdoms from destruction. The prince had become particularly close to Chen during the months of rebuilding the security system. Their discussions had evolved beyond martial arts to include philosophy, leadership, and the responsibilities that came with power. Chen found himself serving as much as a mentor and advisor as a protector, helping prepare the future king for the challenges he would face. The king had offered Chen numerous rewards for his service, including vast estates, precious treasures, and honorary titles that would have made him one of the most powerful nobles in the kingdom. But Chen had declined most of these gifts, accepting only what was necessary to maintain his position and support his work. What Chen valued most was the opportunity to establish a training academy within the palace grounds. Here he could teach martial arts not just to guards and soldiers, but to anyone who wanted to learn. The academy attracted students from across the kingdom and beyond, creating a center of learning that promoted both physical skill and moral development. The academy's most important principle was that martial arts should only be used to protect the innocent and maintain peace. Students learned fighting techniques, but they also studied history, philosophy, and ethics. Chen wanted to ensure that his teaching would produce people who would use their skills wisely and responsibly. One evening, as Chen walked through the palace corridors on his regular security rounds, he encountered a young boy hiding behind a pillar. The child was clearly terrified, and Chen's gentle questioning revealed that he was the son of one of the kitchen servants. The boy had witnessed something that frightened him but was afraid to tell anyone about it. Chen knelt down to the boy's level and spoke in the same calm voice he used with his martial arts students. He assured the child that he would be protected and that telling the truth was always the right choice, even when it seemed scary. Gradually, the boy's story emerged. He had seen one of the new guards meeting secretly with strangers near the palace walls. Money had been exchanged, and the guard had drawn maps of the palace layout. The boy understood enough to know this was wrong, but he was afraid that no one would believe him, or that the guard might hurt him if he found out about the report. Chen listened carefully, his mind already analyzing the implications of what he was hearing. The conspiracy they had uncovered months earlier had apparently not eliminated all the threats to the royal family's safety. New enemies were always emerging, and eternal vigilance was the price of protecting those who served the people. But this time, Chen felt completely confident in his ability to handle the situation. His months of experience as Royal Guard captain had taught him how to investigate suspicious activity without alerting potential conspirators. He also had a network of loyal guards and staff members who could help him gather information safely. More importantly, Chen had learned that his greatest strength was not just his martial arts abilities, but his understanding of human nature. People trusted him because they could see that he genuinely cared about their welfare. This trust made them willing to share information and cooperate in ways that would have been impossible for someone who ruled through fear or intimidation. Chen thanked the boy for his courage and promised that the situation would be handled quietly and safely. He also made a mental note to establish better systems for palace staff to report suspicious activities without fear of retaliation. The security of the kingdom depended not just on trained guards, but on the eyes and ears of everyone who lived and worked in the palace. As he continued his evening rounds, Chen reflected on how much his life had changed since that first meeting with Mr. Wang at the temple ruins. The simple mountain master had become a protector of kingdoms, a teacher of future leaders, and a guardian of peace for thousands of people. Yet in many ways, he remained the same person who had spent decades perfecting his martial arts in quiet solitude. His core values had not changed, only the scale on which he applied them. The discipline, respect, and dedication to protecting others that had guided his personal training now served a much larger purpose. Chen realized that his grandfather's legacy had come full circle. The old man's loyal service to royalty had created opportunities for Chen to serve in his own way. But unlike his grandfather, who had been simply a bodyguard, Chen had become something more complex and valuable, a bridge between the ancient wisdom of martial arts and the practical needs of modern leadership. The palace bells chimed midnight as Chen completed his rounds. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and new opportunities to serve. There would always be threats to investigate, students to teach, and systems to improve. The work of protecting peace was never truly finished. But as Chen walked through the quiet corridors toward his chambers, he felt a deep sense of satisfaction. His martial arts skills, developed through decades of patient practice, had found their true purpose. He was no longer just a master of fighting techniques, but a guardian of the principles that made civilization possible. The mountain dojo where his journey had begun still existed in his memory as a place of peace and contemplation. Someday, perhaps, he would return there to teach the lessons he had learned about applying martial arts wisdom to the complexities of real-world leadership. But for now, his duty lay in the palace, protecting those who served the people and ensuring that future generations would inherit a world where strength served justice rather than conquest. Chen smiled quietly to himself as he prepared for sleep, knowing that tomorrow would bring new opportunities to live up to the trust that had been placed in him. The karate master, who had once thought he understood his own limitations, had discovered that true mastery had no boundaries when it was dedicated to protecting others.